Okay, we'll get started now. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to call this meeting of the Maple Run Unified School District Board of Directors to order at 6:03 p.m. Today is Wednesday, December 16th, 2020, and we are meeting electronically. We have 9 board members present, representing 8.5 votes. The first item on the agenda is the agenda review. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So,
Thank you, Al. Thank you, Jack. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. 8.5 to 0. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, welcome everybody. It's cold. I had a sweatshirt on earlier, I took it off, but we'll see how it goes. All right, the next item on the agenda is visitors. Do we have any visitors here who wish to address the board tonight? Does anybody see any? Jason, Brenda? I don't see any messages or anything. Okay, item 5, the consent agenda. On the consent agenda tonight, we have the approval of the minutes of November 30th, ESP negotiations planning, the December 2nd board meeting, and the December 19th professional staff negotiations planning. If anybody wants to remove one of these for questions or clarifications, please let me know. If I don't hear any objections, the consent agenda will be adopted. All right, hearing none, the consent agenda is adopted. On to old business, item 6A, COVID update. Dr. Dearth.
Thanks, Jeff. Good evening, everybody. We haven't had a lot of changes since the last time we've been on. I'll give you an update on a few things. We have had some additional cases now, as is pretty much every place in the state. I think we're up around 12 total. And they've hit every school in such a way, in some ways. The one thing that has changed since the last time, we have had one case where the Department of Health feels pretty confident that it was a school transmission. Up to this point, we've been able to say that there hasn't been any school transmission. Still happening, it's one for sure at this point, though there's still testing going on. So it's still good, but it does prove that there can be school transmission under certain circumstances. There's been a lot of debate. I think the biggest thing right now occurring throughout the state is what people should be doing when school opens up again on January 4th. And there's some division on that. Some people feel that schools should close down and go remote preemptively, given what's happening right now and given the guidance that's out there by the governor relative to who can come into houses and whatever, and who needs to quarantine. At this point, though, most people, including the Champaign Valley superintendents, have said it just at this point doesn't make sense to do that. The metrics haven't shown it, given what we have for criteria on this. And until they do, they feel pretty confident that January 4th, they should have schools open. So what I am looking forward to, I'm not sure, that's not the way I want to what I am going to see what happens is Friday, the governor is supposed to have some presentation on that subject. And at that point, I'll know where he's coming down. Some people think he may be liberalizing his requirements on family gatherings. Others think he's not going to do a thing. We don't know for sure, but he has telegraphed that he's going to put out some information on Friday. So after that, we'll have a better idea of where we go with it. But as of today, we're moving forwards on the January 4th. I do plan on putting a letter out after his, no matter what he says. But after I'm able to review it and see if there are any changes, I'm going to put out a parent letter after that, just to give them an update, say where we're going to be moving forward. And I also just want to reiterate what we've always said, is that we are in a place where we can go back and forth as needed. And that there just needs to be preparations and plans in case at some point we have to say we're going remote for a few days. And that's already happened. It happened, I know, at town with our second grade in pre-K, and I think it's pre-K in another place it's happened. So parents are ready to be able to do that, and I just want to make sure they understand where we're going moving forward. I guess the only last thing I would say is, it's probably no surprise to anybody, this is a trying time for everybody. There continues to be anxiety out there. We're really pleased the vaccine is here. We're really pleased that I saw in the paper where it's come to our own medical center. And unfortunately, that doesn't stop the fact that in the near term, we have to still be vigilant. And that's the other thing I want to say in the letter, is just, while this is good news, we have to continue to stay the course for right now. And everybody's doing a nice job, but I think it would be safe to say that I see a lot of fatigue from people, and they're probably quite well looking forward to the week before, between Christmas and New Year's. It's basically what I have. Do you have any questions?
Grant?
Yeah, vaccine. I would suspect it'll be available to teachers before it's available to the general public. Do you have a sense for, how that'll be encouraged amongst teachers? If it would be, probably mandatory is the wrong word, but if, say, teachers would be allowed to, having, not had it, in front of students, are there any program thinking about implementing for that?
I have to admit, we haven't thought that far ahead, Grant. I do know the last thing I saw in some document that we, teachers, educators, and staff would be in phase 2, which some people were saying would be like early February. So we have a little time, but no, I haven't thought we can't mandate it. I'm basically, what I'm hearing on the street is people are looking forward to taking it. But I know that there's some that still have concerns, and we'll have to talk about that as we move forward.
Yeah, I know Dr. Levine said in the last press conference yesterday that the polling had shown that it was up to 80% of people were willing to take the vaccine. So, and they did say it can't be mandated because it's authorized for emergency use. So, all right, thank you, Kevin.
Welcome.
Let's go on to item 6B. Efficiency Vermont Grant Award Adjustment.
Jeff, sorry to interrupt. Joanna has her hand up, and sorry, I just saw her on page 2 here. So.
Oh, yeah, I can't see page 2. Thank you.
That's why I caught you. Sorry about that.
Go ahead, Joanna. You must be muted.
Okay. Give me a second here. Okay. So Jeff and school board and administrators and faculty and everybody, I don't know if this is the right place, but I would like to share some thoughts and feelings that I have about the current plan right now, of not having a plan, basically, about whether or not we will or we will not go remote upon return. And I made a little pros and cons list that I would like to share with everybody. And so in my opinion, I feel as though that there are a lot more cons to returning January 4th than to having a planned full week of remote learning. And I'd like to share what I think those cons are. I question whether or not we're going to have enough staff to properly cover and provide highly qualified education. I question whether or not we'll be able to uphold the health guidelines at any of the schools with the amount of staff that we do end up having. I wonder how we're going to possibly ensure families follow the guidelines and do not go out of town or have multi-household gatherings or host out-of-town guests. I feel like we could potentially be putting staff and students at more risk by having them in-person learning that first week back. And I question whether or not that's a reasonable request to ask of our families and of our staff again. I question whether there'll be staff who come to school instead of quarantining because they can't afford not to. We're asking teachers to double plan for in-person learning and in-person planning and for remote learning and in-person learning. Sorry about that. And then communicate to families last minute, possibly Sunday, January 3rd, that maybe we decided to go remote for Monday or possibly Monday and Tuesday. What we know about remote learning is that we do better when we're planned. When the teachers are planned, the students are planned, and the families are planned. And I think waiting to tell families on Sunday and staff January 3rd that we decided to go remote is a setup for failure or reduced success at best. If students and families know ahead of time we're planning to be remote, we will have better outcomes, and no one can deny that. Ultimately, is it better for families to have advance notice that we are going remote than the night before? Will they not be able to be better planned for childcare and food with the advance notice? I also think that this decision is going to continue to foster declining staff morale. Staff are exhausted. They are on heightened alert every single day, and they need a break. And they need a break where they can enjoy some time off and not be consumed by this pandemic. And I would ask people to imagine being one of the staff members who abides by the guidelines and then finds out that either too many staff or too many students or families did not. And now the school has to go remote for the first week back. And are we really sending our teachers letters outlining COVID Family Act repercussions? Because now that the COVID Family Act will be null and void on the 31st, teachers aren't allowed to take sick time. And if they do so, or they have to take personal time, but if you do that on or before vacation, then your sick time, your personal time is it's a 2-for-1, like it takes 2 days. So you can only take 2 days of personal time. And it also negatively impacts their retirement. I feel that we have an opportunity to model social emotional learning for our students, for our families and our communities, and our dedicated staff. And we have an opportunity to say yes to prioritizing family, to prioritizing our personal mental health, our workplace health, and our community health. And we can do that by making a conscious decision, an action plan that will increase the success of the 4 days of learning that will take place. At the week that we returned from Thanksgiving break, I had more teachers in my room crying that week than I did kids, which is a change. And I am really concerned that I'm making an assumption right now that the superintendents, have made this pact with, I appreciate the respect, trying to respect the governor's ruling, and I appreciate that. But we also have a responsibility to our staff and our families. And I think that the cons far outweigh the pros. And I think that you will have staff and professional staff and paras take every single sick day they can for the rest of the year. I think we will feel it in our classrooms. I think kids will feel it. And I think it's a big mistake. And I urge us to do something different. We have the ability to do something different. And I think that we will regret not doing so.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments?
I'd like to hear the pros now.
Oh, yes, thank you. All right, hold on a second. Okay. The pros. Ugh. I only found two. Is that in-person learning is more effective than remote learning. And students will have access to breakfast, lunch, and after-school snacks. I couldn't come up with any more, Al.
Goes beyond that.
I'm
The
sorry.
student- It goes beyond that. There's more
Okay.
than that. In school also gives us the opportunity to emotionally and socially advance. We sometimes look at the short term, but in the long term, it also affects the students when we go remote learning. And having spoken to several students over the past few days, I have found that remote learning to them, as much as they understand the importance of it, they don't feel they're getting the education that they should. So
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
two-edged sword, the problem. Here's the problem, Joanne, it's a two-edged sword.
Absolutely, but we're talking about 4 days. We're not talking about the rest of the school year. We're talking about 4 days. That's all. So we're going to make some pretty rash decisions about 4 days.
Steve,
Well, I hate to say this, and having been in the trenches for 29 years, as hard as it is for the teachers, think about those people that are on the front lines every day.
Yeah.
7 days a week. So, they're going way beyond what they can give, but they're still giving. And they're doing it just as well as teachers. I know 4 days seems like, hey, that's nothing. But there is a distinct number of days that we have to accomplish. So I'm just saying, I'm trying to look at the pros and the cons, because it's important to look at the student's viewpoint in addition to the teachers.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Al. And I'm a school social worker, so I'm looking at the students every single day, and I work with the students every single day. And I also know that the teachers are going to be the people who are going to be teaching those students. And so I'm also looking out for the other repercussions that are going to happen. Who are going to be, who are these kids going to be taught by? And I want them to be refreshed, healthy people.
Go ahead, Steve.
Sure. For what it's worth, Al, I appreciate your input and Joanna's as well. I would argue that our teachers very much and our staff very much are on the front lines as well, for what it's worth. And if I could, I hadn't thought about what some of these issues that Joanna brought up. Is some of it predicated on the notion that over the holiday break, there's no telling how many people are going to disregard good advice and get together with families, etc. And thereby that, had we perhaps consider taking that week off, it gives us a bigger window to ensure that when students and staff come back, they're COVID-free as can be. Is that part of it, Joanna?
Absolutely.
So I think it's well worth considering. We're just talking 4 days. Just a thought. It would seem perhaps a small price to pay for maybe a little more insurance. This might be.
Let's listen to our superintendent and see what he thinks,
Sure.
and our assistant superintendent.
Can I say something?
Nobody has said anything wrong, but I think there's some other people who would like to speak.
Oh, go ahead.
So I might have missed this in what, Kevin, what you were saying. In terms of the plan, how much notice will family and teachers be given if the plan is not to go back on January 4th?
If one of the metrics, if we find one of those metrics that we've talked about throughout are not able to be met, then that's when we will state it. So it could be, it very well could be set Sunday night. And I said that, that's why one reason I wanted to put the letter in it. Or it could be early.
Or it could be what?
Earlier.
Okay. Yeah, I think the earlier the better. I mean, I was having this conversation a little bit different than what we're talking about, but the same idea. I was talking with someone about retirement from driving. She's like, don't you think I can? And I'm like, no. But it's so much better to plan ahead than to react in a crisis. And I think as a family member, not that I've got kids in the school system anymore, but the more heads up we can give parents and teachers, the better it's going to work for everyone. So I'm just going to put that out there. And there is a concern that people aren't necessarily going to. So I'm in healthcare. And when I see healthcare workers ignoring the rules and not quarantining or not socially distancing and still coming to work, it's really upsetting. And knowing that probably happened over Thanksgiving and thinking about how much bigger Christmas often is for folks, it makes me nervous. It makes me nervous for me as a healthcare worker doing my work. So.
Thanks, Sue. Grant, did you have something or?
Well, yeah, I mean, with the acceptance criteria, essentially, if you want to call it that, for what it will take to start up on the 4th, if the correct conditions are met and you can do that, great. Obviously there's the uncertainty around the timing of when you'll know whether or not you've met all those criteria. It might be prudent to set the decision criteria a little bit more stringent than the true acceptance criteria, so that if you're close, you don't get into a situation, where you're surprised at the last minute, and you have to close things down, on the Sunday, for example. Just a thought.
Gotcha. Okay, we're going to move on to 6B. So, Bill, you have a grant adjustment.
I'm sorry?
I said we're moving on to item 6B, and Bill has a grant adjustment.
Oh, I thought you said Joe. Sorry.
Thanks, Jeff. This board about a month ago approved a grant through Efficiency Vermont. If you all remember, they're providing grants for improving HVAC systems. You approved an initial grant with Fairfield and Town School, and then we added Collins Pearly. And now since that time, because they're they have to spend all the money, it's part of the CARES Act by the end of this month. They were looking for other projects and came back to us. And we were able to increase the grant award by about $67,000 to $164,725 to include work in the 1930s building in BFA, because we have Negley and Chase on site. So, and some work in the new old hospital wing. And then also about $2,500 worth of work at the city school. So these are all HVACs. We thought it was appropriate, Kevin and I thought it was appropriate to bring it back to the board to accept the award. So that's what I'm bringing you tonight.
So is this requiring more matching funds from us, or is this totally paid for by Efficiency Vermont?
So within BFA, there are more funds, but it's part of the construction project. We're able to get it underneath that bond. So there's no budget, there's no annual budget money. There's the bond money.
Okay.
And then at City School, there was, it was fully funded for the 2,500 and change.
Okay. So let's get a motion on the floor, and then we can ask for questions.
So,
Okay, Al, thank you for the motion to approve the grant award adjustment. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Nina. Any questions for Bill?
Bill, when this just all needs to be approved, or Jeff, this just needs to be approved by the end of the year, but the work probably won't start if that hasn't been scheduled, correct?
The work has to be done before, what we are allowed to get, and this is why Jeff asked if there was other, it's not really matching funds. We have to have the equipment and work done up to December 31st. And so at BFA, we can't get it all done. It's about a $95,000 project, but we can put the rest of it under the bond. Same thing happened at Collins Pearly and at Fairfield. There's just some things that couldn't get finished, but anything we can purchase and have labor billed to us, invoice to us by the end of this month, they'll pay. And that's why City was fully funded, because we were able to get it all done.
Yeah, that last time we saw it, Nina, it was kind of split into two sections of what we could have done before the end of the year and what we couldn't.
So what gets carried into the new year then?
At BFA, what's happening is there's some installation. We're working, I don't want to get too much in the weeds here, but at the 1930s building, there is no HVAC except for what's called a gravity flow ventilation system, which is like the old style heat rises chimney. And so there are about 27 air ducts that go from the basement to the roof. So as heat rises, it's pulling air out and pulling air in through other inlets in the building. And we're actually being able to start controlling those and put better dampers throughout the system. And we're upgrading all the chases. And so all that's being built actually right now at Negley Chase at their workshop, along with all the materials being put on site by the 31st so we can accept it, along with a new energy efficiency exchange unit in the old hospital.
Okay, but that will be carried over though to the new year. Like, I guess what I'm saying is there's really not a lot of time. I mean, I can reach out. I'm just curious what's going to be, I guess, brought forth into the new year.
In terms of financial or in terms of work?
There will be work in each one of the projects except for City School that will be done next year.
Okay.
Just finish up things.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
So, and I have a question. So how much money will the bond of this project, will the bond have to cover?
I'm doing quick, about 30,000.
I think the point is too, Bill, that the construction was coming in under,
Yeah, we're well within the bond amount. So we could make it part of that work, because if you remember correctly, the construction costs were $1 million under the total bond. And so we have been able to add back into the construction project.
Is there a certain amount that that we can't add back in before we have to go back to the taxpayers to say we
Nope.
are going to be, no,
No, the taxpayers gave us 5.5 million
for construction?
authorization for construction, and we're not going
Okay.
over that.
And we can roll this into construction costs.
Yep.
Okay.
okay. Item 6C is a superintendent search update. And Jack, I believe we want to go into executive session for this.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to move this into executive session under 1 VSA 313A3, the appointment or employment of a public official. And so we'll do that at the end. Oh, Martha, item 8D, FY22 budget.
Are you ready?
Never ready.
So I just want to strongly remind everybody, this is a first draft, which means there are still quite a few numbers in play. So this is by no means anywhere, well, it may be close to the final draft, but I can't tell you exactly where it will land at this point. But for individuals that may be new or fairly new, my process is that I have a cover sheet. And on that cover sheet, which is the first page, there is the little top section that indicates the prior year information along with what's in the budget that's being proposed as far as total dollars for expenditures, proposed education spending, the equalized pupil count, which is a piece that we're still waiting on, and then what the estimated per pupil spending is, and the excess threshold. So that's just kind of giving you a little quick snapshot as to how this budget would compare to the prior year budget. The next section is where I kind of break it out a little bit more and give a little bit more detail.
Hey, Martha, just quickly, can you explain how the excess threshold works?
Okay, so if our per pupil spending goes over the excess threshold, what happens is the amount above that excess threshold gets double taxed. So you always want to try and make sure that your per pupil spending is below that excess spending threshold. We've been fortunate in the years that I've been doing this that we haven't come anywhere near going over that threshold.
Right. And you said you were waiting for information. We still don't have equalized pupil count from the
Right. Yeah, so in that second section where I've got notes to the board, in the bottom part of it where I've got information still outstanding, there are still a lot of pieces that are still outstanding that come into play into doing this whole final calculation. I don't have the equalized pupil count. I don't have the 6-semester average for the Northwest Tech Center students because that all plays a part in the cost that gets rolled into the MRUSD budget. I got today at, I think it was 3 o'clock, I got the special ed block grant amount and the early childhood block grant amount. So I got those two pieces of information this afternoon, which are not in these numbers right now. There's many areas of information that I'm still looking for. Also, besides the pieces of information that hasn't come across, is I've still got to review the numbers with the principals. They've reviewed them once, but I want, now that I've got it in a format that I think is easier to read, I want them to review it again just to make sure. Plus the next 2 pages, which are the expenditure summary pages. This is a spreadsheet, which is not driven out of the system. So I have to take the information out of the system and compile it into the spreadsheet. And I know there's a few areas where I've got to do some tweaks. There's some expenses that are in the wrong areas. So when you're looking at this point, it's not, I wouldn't suggest going line by line and saying, well, how come this one is different from this one at this rate? Because I already know that there's a few changes that I need to make.
Do you want to go back to the first page and do that middle section?
Sure. So the middle section, basically, I just have a little bit of breakdown of what the budget expenditure is made up of. I've got it broken out with the cost of wages, and then it goes into the health insurance and related costs, which is the HSA, HRA costs, employee benefits, and I've compared it to the FY21 budget. So in the different areas, you can see where the increases reside. And then there's that other section where it says information still outstanding, which are the pieces that I really need to get final calculations. Then the bottom section is the announced tuition rate information, which the school board needs to set a tuition rate by January 15th. So it's nothing we need to do right now. And I don't have enough information yet to give you a rate to propose to be set for FY22 at this point anyway. So that's just there as a placeholder so we don't forget we've got to do that part. Any questions from anybody on that, just the cover sheet and that summarized information? The next two pages are the expenditures, and I've got the FY20 actual expense column. That's the what was actually spent in FY20. I've got the FY21 adopted budget. That's the budget that went to the voters. Then we have an FY21 working budget, which gets adjusted throughout the year based on criteria. Most of the time, the working budget gets adjusted by the grants that we end up receiving that we don't typically budget for because we don't necessarily know how much we're going to get. And then there's the FY22 proposed budget. And this is a summary of the expenditures. So in the very first page is all the regular education costs broken out by basically by departments. The AOE calls them by functions, and they're summarized in each of those different function areas. The second page goes, the top part is the special education costs.
Can I interrupt, Martha?
Yes, go ahead.
Because I did. Oftentimes there's changes in classifications, that the AOE comes up with. And so we see movements, pluses and minuses. Are there those this year?
I don't believe so. Not to the extent that there have been in the past.
Okay.
I will know better next round because that's when I will have really delved into the differences in the different categories and really try to figure out why there's differences, and if they're because of classification changes, I'll make sure and point them out.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that's been shocking to board members in the past when they see things change a lot.
Yep. So the second page, the top part is the special education, and that's the whole pre-K through 12. So that includes early childhood all the way up through high school. And then the last section is the Northwest Tech Center, which is its own budget within the budget. And that brings us, so that's at this moment in time, our proposed budget right now, which is showing about a 2% increase over the adopted budget from FY21 at this point. There will be pluses and minuses still coming in because some of the pieces of information that I'm waiting on will make changes in the expenditures one way or another.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Then the fourth page is the revenue summary. And again, revenues are just projected, just like expenditures, but just so everybody understands, the voters vote on an expenditure budget. They don't vote on a revenue budget. And the revenues are based on our best guess, especially in the grant area. And a lot of these revenues are reimbursing type revenues. So it depends on how much you spend. The key piece that will change until we get better numbers is the box that I have on the top half that's yellow. It's the $43 million number. That's our education spending estimated education spending at this point. The way that we come up with that number, just so that everybody understands, is all the other numbers on this page get filled in first. So we go through and estimate how much we're going to get for the different areas like impact fees and investment income and reimbursements for state transportation aid or different grants. And the remaining figure between what the expenditure budget is and what our other revenues are, the difference is that education spending number. So that's the number that gets plugged in last. And that's the number that drives everything when it comes to the tax rate and your education spending. Is what the state does is they take that dollar figure and they divide it by your equalized pupil count. And that's the driver for your tax rate calculations. Which brings us to the last page, which I know everybody took a peek at. Nobody waits until the last to look at that page. This is the one that I really strongly want to stress, that this is just estimates right now, and the number is definitely going to change. I know that at the last meeting we said the ADM for FY20, which is part of the calculation for the equalized pupil count, is going to be held harmless with is going to be held harmless because schools had to close early. But what they're going to do is, that's only one piece of the equalized pupil calculation. And what they're going to do is they're going to take, it's a 2-year average. For FY21 budget, they took FY19 and FY20 ADM and they average them. For the 22 budget, they're going to drop off 19, they're going to take FY20, and they're going to use FY20 again for FY21, which in itself sounds like a good idea, but in overall, FY19 ADM student count was higher than it was in FY20. So right off the bat, we're losing some student counts. So even though the ADM is being held harmless, the equalized pupil count is not being held harmless. So I just wanted to make sure some board members that may know what I'm talking about understand that.
Okay.
Okay, so that's a piece that will be coming to us eventually, hopefully before mid-January. Last year it was really late when they finally froze that number for us to work with. So you take your expense budget, you subtract out your local revenue, you end up with your education spending dollar, which is that $43 million figure right now. You divide that by your equalized pupil count, and that gives you a equalized per pupil spending per equalized pupil. And then that is then divided by the yield to come up with a tax rate. And right now this calculation is showing that the equalized tax rate could be about $1.57. We have our 2-cent tax rate decrease, our last of our incentive tax rate decreases. So it'd bring it to $1.55 compared to last year's at this point at $1.46. So we're pretty close to that 10-cent tax rate increase at this point in time. But like I said, this is definitely going to be changing. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, and they won't set the yield until January,
Yeah,
at least.
if that, yeah.
And then do we know how the CLAs have changed?
Haven't gotten that information yet either, so I don't have any idea.
Okay.
Martha,
Another piece of information that I'm waiting for.
Yeah.
Yes,
And-
Susan.
when you said that 10-cent tax increase, that's because we lost all the incentives from.
No. A lot of it has to do with they reduce the yield. Of course, this is, again, these are preliminary numbers. That yield is probably going to change. They reduce the yield, which When they reduce the yield, it increases your tax rate. The equalized, our spending is up about 2%. Our education spending is up 2.5%. So that is a little piece of the driver, but it's not a huge piece of the driver. The largest piece is the yield. They dropped the yield.
Which affects.
I was
Say
just
that
gonna say, and then depending on how much CLA changes,
Right.
that could then hurt the tax rate more.
Could hurt. Yeah, it could hurt or it could help, depending on which way the CLA goes.
Thank you, Martha.
So I have just another quick question. So I've heard, you know, when you read the paper, they say, oh, it's going to be huge tax increases this year. Is that to be expected?
Well, they were predicting that. What was it, Kevin? 9 cents or 9 cents just straight off the top, and that's basically what we're seeing right now.
And is that because of COVID or just because healthcare prices continue to increase and wages? And...
I'm not a big expert on setting the yield, but there are a couple of factors. One of them had to do with state teachers' retirement needs to be funded at a higher level than it had been, and there are more teachers retiring. So there's a big piece of that calculation has to do with the teachers' retirement. There is the piece that the revenues to the state are decreased, so they have to adjust for some of those costs. So there's many factors that go into the setting the yield.
Yeah, I think that retirement fund was a big one because I can't remember when it moved into the education fund. Before it was paid for out of the general fund, but then they moved it in, and then they recently did some kind of audit or something, and they determined that it had been way underfunded by, I think, over 30 million. So
and this is and this is,
you might know, when was the amount paid back to the education fund that they borrowed to go into the general fund several years ago? I don't think that's ever been back.
Yeah, I don't know that for a fact, but I would agree with you, Al.
When was that? Al, do you remember when that was?
Oh, God.
Back in the 1990s.
Maybe about 35 years ago.
Oh, so a long time ago.
Well, that's not long. But yeah, back a while. And I don't think I've ever heard that it was paid back. I know there've been several times it's been asked, but never been answered.
It was during the Dean administration.
Well, I'm sorry, Kevin, I didn't hear that.
I
It
said
was during the Dean administration.
Yeah, you're right.
Can I write that down now?
Yeah.
He doesn't hear it from anybody else.
Well, I'm the only guy that'll speak up about that. Nobody else remembers that.
Okay, thank you, Martha. Do you have anything else?
Nope, that's what I got.
Okay. If people should have questions, if board members have questions, they should email you.
Yes, please.
Let's move on to item 6E, negotiations update. Bill, do you have anything?
Thanks, Jeff. We met both with the ESP and the Teachers Association to start negotiations. We met just yesterday with the teachers and the week before with ESP. We've set dates for 6 negotiation sessions and have tentatively agreed. I have to get the documents out to everybody, but on ground rules. So we're going to start in January. 3 sessions before February break and 3 sessions afterwards for both groups. I don't know, for Jack and Nilda, what?
I said the first TA.
Well, I mean, we're doing it all over Zoom, so it's kind of interesting. And last night we were talking about the actual procedures and how we can lock things in PDFs and all that. So we're getting going on it, but we have ground rules set, which is great. We have some dates. I feel a lot of positive energy, but Nilda and Jack, I should ask what I've forgotten or what else, what other updates should the board have?
I think that's it from the ESP side. You know, we have established the ground rules and we've got the dates going all the way to April, I think.
Yep.
Good.
Same for the professional staff.
Thank you, guys. A lot of work ahead of you. Okay, let's move on to item 7A, the SRO Study Committee appointments. And we're going to move that into executive session under 1 VSA 313A3, the appointment or employment of a public officer or employee. So that's moved to executive session. Item 8A, warrants. Look for a motion now.
I move that the warrants be approved with acknowledgement that passage of the motion will act as individual board members' authorization of their signature on these warrants.
Thank you, Al. Second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Jack. I saw you, Steve. Any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
The ayes have it, 9-0. Item 8B, Superintendent's report.
Well, I didn't have anything, but I also got the impression that after we were talking about what's happening after the holidays, people wanted to hear the superintendent respond to some of that. So I don't want to belabor that point, but I will respond a bit to it. And the first thing I have to say is nobody's saying anything wrong. What worries me a little bit from some of the comments was superintendents don't sit around talking and with gin and tonics and make some rash decisions around these things. There's been hours and hours and hours of discussions around COVID to the point that we now meet more often, and we look at all the points, we balance everything. Safety is always the first thing on our list. And we, as I said, what was mentioned was not wrong. However, some of this stuff was talked about the week before Thanksgiving also. And God, there was a lot of pressure then to do the same thing. And we chose to stick to the guns unless the metrics said differently. And as you probably heard in the governor's report, that worked. Was it perfect? No, I think we all can give you a story of somebody who we heard either through anonymous emails or our next door neighbor or something who didn't follow directions correctly. But generally, it worked, and we followed the science and we followed the metrics. We are following the fact that students are safer in school than not. We're following the fact that when they're not in school, we don't know where they are sometimes. We have followed the fact that while there's certainly various opinions and they're all legitimate and justifiable, there are equally as many parents and students who want to be in school and are struggling right now because they can't. Oh, but we do keep things safe. We want our staff to be safe. We want them. We completely agree. There's nobody in this Zoom part that are employees, including myself, who aren't overtired right now. We also have 11 days off. And hopefully those days we can use it for R&R and to be more relaxed. So I cannot in any way debate, and I won't debate anybody, because they're right. They're just as right as we are. And I realize that. And in 2 weeks, I might be proven right, and Joanna might be proven right. But what I can say fully is that we're following the science, we're following the metrics. If it turns out that something changes, yeah, it might mean short term, we have to tell people that we go to remote. We've already done that, as I said earlier, and it worked quite well when we had to do that with a certain grade. And people need to be prepared for that. We hope we don't need to, but in a way, it's not a lot different than if you get called at 5 in the morning and there's a snow day. So we are doing the very best we can to make the very best decisions for everyone, knowing that there's no right answer or no wrong answer.
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin. Alicia has a question for you.
I do. Just following up, and it may be something that's always available to staff, but if there had been a tragedy or something in the district, we would have set up EAP access for folks. Because of the heightened stress and heightened anxiety, emotions that staff may or may not be feeling, are there any efforts to connect them with services and provide supports throughout the district? I know in the hospital incident command structure, there is an employee wellness person who's responsible for that. I don't know if that's something that is possible or has been discussed.
Well, Bill wants to answer that too. My short answer would be yes. We do have an employee assistance program also, but I'll let Bill talk.
It's a great question, Alicia. Jermaine Cross has been putting out emails probably at least once a week, if not a little bit different period, either plus or minus a bit. I just know the last one went out and was workshops for staff and reminders about EAP. We have a full employee assistance program and ways of helping. So, so that happens also individually as well when we know someone needs some help. So I know those words have come out of my mouth in working with employees. So that has been there. There's been reminders. And I know there's good reminders coming out from other organizations, including the association, about taking care of yourself. So.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that staff.
No, it's really key. It's really
the message.
Key.
I want them to hear the message from the board that we're concerned and thinking about them and hoping that they have what they need to take care of themselves.
Yep.
And Alexis pointed out that NCSS resources are also going out to staff. Joanna.
I want to apologize for using the word rash, because I don't think that decisions are being made rashly. I think I was talking more about the context of the question that I was answering at the time, and I do not think that this decision about January is being made rashly at all. I certainly don't think that you guys are getting together and drinking gin and tonics. I think that's, unnecessary to say something like that, Kevin. And I didn't come here to debate you today. I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm making an appeal because you have the authority to do that. And principals don't have the authority to open their school or not open their school. Superintendents are the only people who have the authority. And so it is a pact amongst the superintendents you're all deciding to do the same thing, and you're all making sure that everybody is doing what you've asked them to do. So normally principals have more autonomy, and in this situation, they do not. So I'm making a plea to think about the wellness of everybody. And this isn't just about teachers. This is going to have repercussions beyond teachers, because those teachers teach our children. And it is, I believe this is short-sighted. If we talk about short-sighted, we're talking about 4 days. We're not talking about the overall education of people for the entire school year. We're talking about whether or not people are going to finish 2020 being able to be, you know, around their loved ones who they haven't seen in months. We have, you know, at my school, I've got 10 teachers who are, you know, between 20 and 25, and they haven't seen their family since last year. And they want to see their family, and they live alone, you know, here in Franklin County. And there's so many people who have gotten sick or gotten ill or who have died. And we have an opportunity to make a humane decision. And we're thinking that we have to be in school for these 4 days, that's the priority, rather than people being kind to one another and doing something that allows people to be together and support each other for 4 days. And this is an unnecessary fight. And it's just such a bummer. And I speak to parents every single day. I need an inordinate amount of parents. That's what I do. And they would like to be home with their families.
Okay,
So Joe, can I just ask one question?
sure.
So Joe, are you saying, I'm feeling a little confused at the moment.
You're
Are you
feeling
saying,
confused
like,
because this is a big show.
no, so are you saying that 4 extra days would give people time to quarantine if they have family in
Absolutely.
on the 25th? Okay.
Absolutely. Teachers after Thanksgiving had to listen to kids in the classroom talk about how they went to Johnny's, you know, on Sunday after Thanksgiving, or they got together and with this family member and that family member. And then they were supposed to report back to the principal who, you know, who had to talk to the families. And it's nerve-wracking for people to know that people did not follow the guidelines. And then they have these kids in their classroom. Or there's adults in the building who haven't followed the guidelines who are in the building.
Yeah, I get that.
Just,
I get that.
This is unnecessary. It's unnecessary.
My plea was more to making sure we give people a heads up. Because again, I'll say,
absolutely,
it's so much better to plan ahead than to try and across the board, no matter what we're talking about, education, healthcare, childcare. So much easier to plan ahead than to kind of react in a crisis. So anyways, I was just trying to clarify what you were saying.
We call people Sunday night to tell them that we're going remote. You'll be lucky to have 50% of your kids online the next morning. You'll be lucky.
Okay.
If I could, I'm sorry. One question, if I could, for Kevin. You mentioned the superintendent's looking at the science and it's science driven. Do you know whether or not part of the protocols they consider are issues such as Joanna brought up? Do they take into account the fact that over Christmas time, there more than likely will be people breaking protocol who perhaps could benefit from an extended quarantine before coming back?
Certainly we did, Steve. The only issue is it's very difficult to deal with what ifs. We're dealing with the facts that we have in front of us. And the facts we have in front of us, this didn't happen in Thanksgiving. The governor said that everything went fine with that. Having said that, Joanna's right, it did happen. We saw it in some cases, but as a general rule, no. So we're following the facts we know, not what might be. And I know that's tough. And we could be criticized for it. We are being criticized for it. But we're following, just as the governor's doing, and Dr. Levine and Dr. Fauci, we're following it what we know.
Okay. Item 8C, board announcements. Anybody have anything? I should say, I wanted to mention under Kevin's report, there's been no update on sports, so.
Oh yeah, right. That's supposed to come on Friday too.
Yeah. Okay, seeing none. Agenda items for future meetings. Negotiations, budget. That's probably plenty. And now I'd like for a motion to go into executive session under 1 VSA 313A3, the appointment or employment of a public official for a superintendent search update and SRO study committee appointments.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Corey.
Second.
Thank you, Nina. All those in favor signify by saying, oh, that's to include the superintendent. We just need the superintendent. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it, 9-0. Hey, thank you, everybody. Okay, we're out of executive session. And now I would look for a motion to appoint the following people to the SRO study committee. Leah Fitzgerald, Connor Powell, Alexis Hoyt, Martin Katam, Sarah Biggie, Robert Gissel, Michael Hoflick, George Murphy, Kathleen Fuller, John Nichols, and Shannon Trainer.
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you for the second, Joanna. Any discussion? And basically, I would say that we've selected them based on their applications and the qualifications that they show. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it, 9-0. Thank you, everybody. Seeing as how we're at the end of our agenda, we are adjourned.
Thank you.